Hyansu rented a new apartment planning to end his life there, but before he could even get started, a lawnmower blade from a nearby security guard's machine malfunctioned and flew straight at him, nearly killing him by accident. The guard rushed over, explaining it wasn't even his job. Turns out, his boss had been overworking him, piling on multiple roles until accidents were basically inevitable. When the guard found out Hyansu was a new tenant, he didn't even bother to apologize. Back at the apartment, Hyansu headed up to the rooftop, but just as he was about to end it all, a distant sound caught his attention. It was a girl Unyu dancing alone on the rooftop. Her movements were mesmerizing. For a moment, Hyansu forgot what he'd come out there to do, and she noticed him too, standing on the edge. Without missing a beat, Unyu told him flatly, "If you're gonna die, don't do it here. Don't make it someone else's problem." Just like that, Hyansu's first suicide attempt failed. Back at the apartment entrance, the security guard was now standing right in front of Hyansu's door. When he saw Hyansu approaching, he said Hyansu needed to fill out a tenant registration form. But one thing was clear, the guard had had a nosebleed earlier. Just minutes earlier, around the time Hyansu had been on the rooftop, his boss had scolded him again for sleeping on the job, saying the residents were starting to complain. As punishment, the boss ordered him to drag his mattress out of the security room. Right after that, a middle-aged female tenant walked up and handed him a package of yellow croaker fish, something she didn't like to eat. The guard thought she was being kind, until he opened it and was hit with the stench. The fish had gone bad. It was in that moment his body started reacting, his nose started bleeding and wouldn't stop. As for the tenant registration form, Hyansu ignored it.
아까는 미안했어. 이거.
네.
Inside his unit, Hyansu looked through the peephole and saw the guard still standing there, refusing to leave. Meanwhile, music composer Jisoo stepped out like she did every day, only today. She ran into a strange woman. The woman was pushing a baby stroller and asked Jisoo, "Isn't my baby cute?" But when Jisoo looked down, there was no baby inside.
안녕. 예쁘죠? 네, 예뻐요.
Not knowing how to respond, she just froze until young Jae-hyun, a devout Catholic living in the building, walked up beside her. He quietly explained that the woman's child had died in a car accident, and she hadn't been the same since. After that, Jisoo and Jae-hyun exchanged names for the first time. Just as Jae-hyun stepped out of the elevator, he unexpectedly ran into a man with a face full of scars. The man's name was Bayan Sangwook, a hitman from the criminal underworld. Inside Sangwook's apartment, there wasn't just him, there was also a man tied to a chair. The man kept asking, terrified, "What did I do wrong? Why are you doing this?" Sangwook didn't answer. He simply played a video in front of him, then shoved a lit cigarette into the man's mouth. After his failed suicide attempt, Hyansu threw himself into gaming like a madman. He decided he'd try ending it all again just at a later time, but while he was gaming, one of his online friends typed something strange, something about sudden nosebleeds. Hyansu found it odd, but brushed it off. Later, when he walked out the door, he saw the instant noodles he had bought scattered all over the floor. As he bent down to check, a bloody hand suddenly reached out from nearby, scaring him half to death. He scrambled back into the apartment in a panic. Then, the doorbell rang. A woman's voice called out from the other side, asking for help. Hyansu cautiously approached and checked the video intercom. A woman was standing there, pleading with him to open the door. Hyansu said he could call the police for her, but remembering the bloody hand from earlier, he asked her to show her left hand. The moment he said that, the woman snapped. She went completely feral, her face twisting and mutating right before his eyes. Fortunately, a noise from upstairs distracted her and drew her attention away. Hyansu, stunned by what he'd just seen, grabbed a broom and bolted from the apartment. He passed out the moment he ran into Sangwook. That woman, now completely transformed, appeared outside Jisoo's door. Jisoo caught a glimpse of her distorted face.
혹시 다치셨어요? 앞으로 조용히 할게요. 죄송하다니까요. 너무하잖아요.
When she stepped out again, the woman was gone, but Sangwook was now there. He noticed deep dents on the metal security door. As a killer, he could tell instantly this wasn't from knocking, it was from slamming. But what he couldn't figure out was, how did that woman have that kind of strength? On the other side of the building, a crowd had gathered downstairs. The front gate was shut tight, and their phones had lost signal. With nowhere to go, they stood there, desperate to figure out what was happening. In the security room, the supermarket owner found the switch that controlled the main gate, but just as the gate began to open, a monstrous figure appeared at least 2 meters tall, its face completely distorted. Eun-hyuk shouted, "Close the door, now!" But it was too late. The creature had already forced its way in. Within seconds, a man was killed, his body drained completely of blood. Thinking fast, Eun-hyuk grabbed a fire extinguisher and slowly pushed the monster back. He was just about to drive it out the door when the extinguisher ran out. Suddenly, Seo Kyung, a firefighter, appeared out of nowhere, tackling the creature and rolling outside with it. But on her way back, the monster pierced her ankle with its claw. Eun-hyuk rushed forward, using his own body to keep the gate open. Just in time, Kyung made it back through the gate as it slammed shut behind her. Everyone was frozen, shaken by what they just witnessed, and the supermarket owner, realizing Kyung was a firefighter, didn't thank her for saving their lives. Instead, he started complaining.
아니 거기 소방관이라며 나라에서 뭐 하는 거야?
조치가 있을 겁니다.
1년에 내는 세금이 얼마인데 저런 한 마리 처리 못하고 이씨.
아니요. 한 마리가 아니에요.
On the other side, Hyansu stood by the window and witnessed what looked like the end of the world, but in the very next moment, his own nose began to bleed uncontrollably. He collapsed. Jisoo found him and dragged him to safety. At that moment, Hyansu's body temperature had dropped unnaturally low, but Jisoo didn't seem alarmed. After all, no one really knew how these monsters were being created. Instead of staying with Hyansu, Jisoo chose to leave the room alone. As she turned a corner in the stairwell, she saw a man facing the wall, muttering to himself, "Why are they blaming me for everything?" The rage in his voice made it clear he hated his boss, and he wanted revenge. Jisoo carefully crept past him, but just then, the bottle he was holding slipped and rolled to her feet. The man looked up, and in that instant blood started pouring from his nose and mouth. Before he could fully transform, Jisoo swung her weapon, slamming him to the ground. She moved closer, trying to check on him, but Jae-hyun appeared just in time and warned her, "Don't go near him." Before Jisoo could react, the man began to mutate. Jae-hyun rushed in, sword in hand, and sliced through half the man's skull, ending the immediate threat. The two of them thought it was over, but just as they were walking away, the monster with only half a head left started rising again. The residents on the first floor were in chaos. The same middle-aged woman who had earlier given the guard a bag of rotten fish was now demanding to go outside and search for her daughter, ignoring everyone's warnings. Because of what happened earlier, and the way Eun-hyuk kept calm under pressure, everyone had started looking to him as the leader. Eun-hyuk ordered them to seal off the main door. The woman begged him, again and again, to let her out, but Eun-hyuk refused. With monsters possibly lurking around any corner, even one misstep could get them all killed. The woman tried to force her way out. Just then, everyone's phones buzzed simultaneously. A government emergency alert lit up every screen in the room. At that moment, a chilling silence fell over the crowd. A creeping sense of dread began to take over. The alert warned them, anyone experiencing nosebleeds, fainting, or violent behavior must be isolated immediately. If there was any calm before that message, it vanished instantly. Everyone began panicking, shouting, accusing, demanding answers. Most of them wanted one thing, to get out and find the nearest shelter, but the exits to the outside world had already been locked down. One of the curly-haired young men suggested taking shelter upstairs. That sparked a disagreement. Two factions quickly formed and neither side was backing down. In the middle of all the arguing, a strange noise came from beyond the sealed gate. Then, the gate opened and Sang-wook walked out, calm as ever, but his shoulder was bleeding and people noticed. Byun-ael stepped forward, took one look, and shouted, "He's been bitten." And he wasn't wrong. Just minutes ago, Sang-wook had run into Eun-yu in the hallway. She had collapsed. While he was helping her, he didn't notice the female zombie behind him until it was too late. Sang-wook didn't explain. He didn't say a word. But then Zap, the supermarket owner, shot him with a stun gun. Sang-wook collapsed. Just then, Eun-yu walked in through the main entrance. She glanced at Sang-wook lying on the floor, but she didn't say a word. 8 hours later, Hyansu was online. searching for any information about the mutations. One post from a mysterious user claimed it wasn't a disease at all but a curse. He even admitted that he himself had already been infected, and if you started showing symptoms, he said, "There's one thing you need to know, you must take your own life. But if you're determined to live until the end, there's something else you need to understand." Before he could scroll further, the page suddenly went blank. Internet connection lost. Since the outbreak began, Hyansu hadn't eaten a single bite. Remembering the cup noodles outside, he walked toward the door, but the moment he opened it, he came face to face with the monster whose head had been half sliced by Jae-hyun. With no eyes left, it hunted purely by sound, tracking every little noise. Hyansu froze, hand over his mouth to stop himself from breathing too loud. Just as he reached for a broom nearby, Hoon Hyuk's voice came through the intercom. Elsewhere, Jae-hyun and Jisoo were passing by room 802 when they heard strange noises from inside. As they pressed their ears closer, they realized someone was quietly repeating the door passcode from within. The door opened and inside was the perverted man Sang-wook had tied up earlier. They had no idea who he really was. Thinking he was just another survivor, they untied him. Meanwhile, Hyansu's suicidal thoughts had grown stronger than ever. He walked over to the window, ready to end it all. But just as he looked down, he saw something bizarre. A man was trying to escape by climbing down with a rope, hoping to reach safety. What he didn't know was that just a few meters away, a one-eyed monster was silently waiting. From above, Hyansu watched in horror. The man fell crashing to his death. Hyansu ducked back inside. Shaken, the man's child screamed for help. At that moment, Hyansu shoved his fear aside, grabbed something, and hurled it straight at the monster. The distraction worked, but the one-eyed creature turned and wrapped its limbs around Hyansu. Just when it seemed like it was all over, Han Dusik, the man in room 1408, fired a homemade sniper rifle and took the monster down. Hyansu had survived. Dusik first used written notes to explain the creature's weak points. Then, he told Hyansu to come to room 1408. He gave him one more piece of advice: always keep your phone on call mode. When the monsters get close, the signal interference will make a sound. Hyansu took a deep breath, bracing himself, and began the trek to room 1408. Meanwhile, Sang-wook managed to escape. Earlier, the supermarket owner had knocked him out with a stun gun and tied him up. He planned to kill Sang-wook before he could turn into a monster, but Sang-wook had already regained consciousness. He was a trained killer, fast and precise. Before the store owner could react, Sang-wook struck first, knocking him out cold. After a few close calls, Hyansu finally reached room 1408. He wanted to ask how they could work together to save the child, but the moment he saw Dusik's legs, he realized this mission was going to be a solo job. Dusik, unable to move himself, upgraded Hyansu's weapon so he could defend himself better. On the way to the little girl's room, Hyansu ran into the half-headed monster again. Using a stun attack, he bought himself a few seconds to run, but no matter how far he went, the monster kept finding him. It retracted its tendrils and Hyansu used a bouncy ball to throw off its hearing. Then he rushed in from behind and stabbed it straight in the head. But even that wasn't enough to kill it. In a world like this, food had become everything. The supermarket owner had a whole store to himself, but he refused to share with anyone. When he saw Ikyung taking food without asking, he completely lost it, screaming at her in rage. His own wife stood silently by the side, so he took out his anger on her instead. Outside, the kids heard a voice at the door. It was Hyansu. To them, it was the most comforting sound they could possibly hear. He had come to bring them back to room 1408. Before they left, Hyansu carefully explained what they needed to watch out for on the way. But the moment he stepped outside, a sound like nothing he'd ever heard before echoed in his mind. Blood gushed from his mouth and nose. The little girl tried to come closer, but Hyansu shouted for them to run now.
너 때문이야. 너 때문이야! 넌 불쌍해. 넌 억울해. 죽어버려.
As the screen darkened, the darker version of Hyansu began to emerge, and with him came memories he thought he had buried long ago. Hyansu used to be cheerful and outgoing, but after being bullied by his classmates, Everything about him changed. He started locking himself in his room, spending all his time gaming. His father was furious about it. That argument led to a car accident that killed everyone in the family except Hyansu. When Hyansu woke up in the hospital, he thought the whole apocalypse had been just a bad dream, but later that night, when he walked out onto the street, he saw something terrifying. One by one, the people around him started disappearing into thin air. Then his dark self appeared before him.
난 네가 증오하고 싫어하는 사람들을 모조리 사라져버리게 할 수 있어. 이것보다 더한 것도 해줄 수 있어. 난 너야. 넌 그냥 받아들이면 돼.
형아, 왜 그래?
A little girl's voice snapped Hyansu out of the nightmare, but right in front of him stood a massive creature. The bulky monster kept muttering the same word over and over, protein. Clearly, his desire in life had been fitness. The creature lunged for the little girl, but Hyansu grabbed its leg with everything he had. Enraged, the monster swung its huge fists, pummeling Hyansu's thin body again and again. Just then, Jae-hyun arrived, slashing the beast from behind with his sword. Bringing it down, Jisoo rushed in and dragged Hyansu away. Just in time, when Jae-hyun asked if he was okay, Hyansu lifted his head and his pupils had returned to normal. Meanwhile, the little girl led her younger brother upstairs, but suddenly the half-headed monster reappeared right in front of them. She remembered what Hyansu had told her about this kind of creature, so she held her brother tightly, covering both their mouths, not daring to make a sound. The monster slowly moved away. Just when she thought it was safe, the bulky creature returned from behind. But the half-headed monster was drawn by the sound and accidentally stabbed the bulky beast. Facing monsters like this, the little girl showed a level of calm far beyond her years. She knocked on door after door, but no one answered. After the half-headed monster was taken out, the bodybuilder beast came back. Just as the muscle-bound monster was about to reach the little girl, the mother who had lost her child appeared. Pushing a baby stroller, her desire was her child, and she wouldn't let anyone hurt them. Lying on the ground, dazed, the woman saw a vision: her child standing before her, but the monster crushed the stroller beneath its foot without mercy. In that instant, the woman snapped back to reality.
알고 있었어. 내 아기가 세상에 없다는 거.
Hyansu and the others saw the monster ruthlessly attacking her. When the creature turned its attention back to them, the woman jumped onto its head. Desire turns people into monsters, and she had mutated. But even in that form, she still had a sliver of humanity left. Jisoo and Jae-hyun rushed in to help. Jae-hyun took the chance to lure the monster away. Jisoo approached the woman to check on her. Her body was slowly returning to normal. Then she lifted her head and asked,
아이들은요?
After narrowly surviving, Hyansu led the kids safely back to room 1408. The fight with the muscle beast was nearing its end. Jae-hyun led it toward the window, and with a sudden sidestep the monster fell straight out. Later, the woman, now fully human again, made her way to room 1408. Not long after, Jae-hyun and Jisoo returned as well. Everyone gathered and shared a meal. Afterwards, Hyansu confessed he was one of them, a mutant. Jisoo wasn't surprised. She had already seen it for herself. On the TV, the president appeared to give a public address, but suddenly, he too began to mutate. For the people watching at home, it was the final straw. If even the president wasn't safe, how could they hold on to any hope? The supermarket owner, desperate to hoard supplies, locked the store from the inside. Then the man Sang-wook had once tied up the pervert suddenly showed up. Trying to win favor, he brought out loads of food and shared it with everyone. While the group was still busy eating, Ik-hyun ran into trouble. She set out alone, trying to explore other parts of the building, and as expected, something unexpected happened. A strange monster captured her, suspended her in the air, and trapped her in a massive spiderweb. The next morning, the building's PA system came alive. Taking advantage of Eun-hyuk's moment of distraction, the middle-aged woman opened the front gate. As the gate opened, her daughter appeared outside, panicked and running straight toward them. A man in camouflage rushed out to rescue her, but it was no use. He was killed by a monster, and the daughter died just meters from safety. The mother watched both deaths unfold in front of her and broke down in grief. This was no ordinary zombie outbreak. It was a crisis unlike anything the world had ever seen. By this day, the entire nation had become a living hell. In a world like this, saving others often meant losing yourself, but there was no time left to grieve. This building still hiding secrets, still holding horrors waiting to be uncovered. After making sure the children were safe, Hyansu and the others prepared to leave. Before they went, the kids turned to Hyansu to say thank you. Moments like that were rare for someone like him, but the fear of death still loomed heavy over everyone.
졸지. 유치원 원장이 됐네.
The supermarket owner's wife was growing more and more worried about Ik-kyung. At that moment, Ik-kyung had already broken free and was crawling through a ventilation shaft, trying to escape from a spider-like monster. The tight space left little room to hide and the spider creature was right behind her. The pressure was suffocating. Ik-kyung used all her strength to press herself against the top of the duct. The creature's vision was limited so it didn't see her. Once it passed, Ik-kyung scrambled toward a nearby exhaust vent. She kicked it open with her foot, but just as she was about to jump down, the spider monster spotted her and shot a web that wrapped around her neck. Her phone slipped and fell behind a railing. Ik-kyung struggled, managed to reach a shard of glass with her feet, and after a brutal effort, finally cut herself loose. The monster didn't follow, and Ik-kyung narrowly escaped. Then her phone lit up. It was a call from her husband, but all she could do was watch. Later, Ik-kyung walked up to Eun-hyuk and punched him in the face. Meanwhile, the city's emergency broadcast sounded again. The military announced that from this moment on, the nation was under full martial law. Though they still didn't know the exact cause of the mutation, they'd confirmed one thing: the monsters were tied to human desire. The stronger the desire, the higher the chance of transformation.
불특정 다수의 시민들이 괴생명체로 변하는 현상을 확인하였습니다. 정확한 원인은 밝혀지지 않았지만 인간의 욕망과 관련된 것으로 추정됩니다. 호흡기나 혈액을 통한 전염은 아닙니다. 체온 저하, 코피, 혼절, 한청, 환각 등의 증상을 보이는 자는 격리하십시오. 괴생명체는 뛰어난 회복 능력과 재생 능력이 있습니다. 완전히 괴생명체로 변하기 전에는 심각한 절단이나 손상은 재생할 수 없습니다. 그렇기 때문에 괴생명체를 없앨 수 있는 유일한 시간이며 이를 골든타임이라 명명하였습니다. 군은 현 사태를 해결할 능력과 의지가 있습니다. 살아남으십시오. 건투를 빕니다.
For many, the military's announcement felt like hope, a reason to believe they might be saved. Elsewhere, while checking on survivors with Jae-hyun and Jisoo, Hyansu was attacked by a mysterious creature. He fell straight down from above. Eun-yu witnessed it with her own eyes. Later, she found him and helped bring him back. That's when the others learned something else. Hyansu had the ability to recover unnaturally fast. He wasn't normal, he had mutated, but he was different. Instead of killing him on the spot, the group decided to vote on what to do with him. Eun-hyuk pulled out a stack of paper and suggested a secret ballot. The supermarket owner immediately made his stance clear: he wanted Hyansu gone. The others didn't say much. Only Eun-hyuk stood up and voiced his opposition. Before the vote began, he said something that struck a nerve. By casting this vote, you're choosing to become a murderer. The words hit everyone like a brick, except, of course, the supermarket owner, who stepped forward again, loud as ever.
머리 손 안 들어?
사실상 각자 누가 동의했는지 모르는 게 나은 거 아닌가? 민주주의 국가에서 투표를 활용하는 건 너무나 당연한 거고.
민주주의 좋아하시네. 세상이 망했어.
그리고 부인분한테 여편 내니 뭐니 막대 먹은 소리 좀 멈추시죠. 매우 불쾌하네요.
이런 씨. 네가 뭔데 신경 쓰...
그만두시죠.
After the voting ended, the results were in 8 votes for exile, 7 against. If even one of the 2 remaining votes was also a yes, Hyansu would be forced out. The final 2 ballots were revealed: 1 vote against, the other abstained. The supermarket owner couldn't accept the result. He shouted furiously, demanding Hyansu be kicked out, but suddenly his body betrayed him. Blood poured from his nose and mouth.
마음 단단히 먹어요. 괴물한테 먹히기 싫으면 나한테도 투표권이 있나? 이거 넣으면 저 아저씨도 나랑 같이 나가는 거죠? 맞아요?
The supermarket owner collapsed. In the end, Hyansu cast his vote against himself, and in doing so, he dragged the supermarket owner down with him. Exactly what he wanted. Both of them were locked up in the isolation room. There, the supermarket owner begged Hyansu to teach him how to control the monster inside. This man, who used to beat his wife regularly, was now facing a monstrous transformation of his own. Her abusive husband was now on the verge of turning into a monster, and though she had lived in fear for years, the thought of truly losing him still left her torn inside. Later, she approached Ikyung and brought her some food, but before Ikyung could eat, she began gagging. As someone who'd been through it, the woman immediately understood Ikyung was pregnant. Meanwhile, Sangwook tracked down the pervert and threw several punches straight at him. Knowing he wouldn't survive much longer, the man ran into the common area, claiming he was starting to show symptoms. It was a desperate move to buy himself time. Sangwook chased after him, ready to take him down, but Jae-hyun stepped in to stop him. In that moment of distraction, the pervert slammed the shutter gate shut, forcing Sangwook to back off. For now, like the supermarket owner, the pervert wanted something from Hyansu, the secret to coexisting with the monster inside. Back in room 1408, the woman chopping vegetables suddenly showed signs that something was wrong. Her pupils turned pitch black. She didn't even notice when she sliced her own fingers. Later, the little girl approached Dusik and whispered, "She's been in the bathroom for an hour, and hasn't moved." That set off alarms in Dusik's mind. He picked up his weapon and cautiously opened the door. What he saw left him speechless. The woman's desire was her child. Now, her body had morphed into a giant fleshy sphere, and inside it, a monstrous infant was growing. She had once told Dusik, "If I turn into one of them, kill me." But standing there, seeing her like that, he couldn't bring himself to do it. She didn't want to hurt anyone. Was it so wrong to just want her child back? Eun-hyuk came to the isolation room. He wanted to talk to Hyansu. Before he could leave, the supermarket owner ran up to him, claiming that Hyansu was just being used. And he wasn't wrong. Eun-hyuk had kept Hyansu around because of his abilities. Now, it was time for Hyansu to be useful. From here on out, all the most dangerous tasks would fall to him. That's what Eun-hyuk told him plain and cold. Hyansu's departure pushed the supermarket owner even further into madness. When his wife brought him food, he didn't thank her. Instead, he grabbed her violently. Ikyung, watching all this unfold, confronted Eun-hyuk. She didn't agree with using someone like that. There had to be another way. Eun-hyuk then learned that Dusik could craft weapons, so he sent Hyansu and Sangwook upstairs.
차은수가 버텨낼 수만 있다면 우리에겐 차은수보다 강력한 무기는 없어요.
Eun-hyuk wasn't the oldest in the group, but he saw things the clearest. During the last vote, he had even considered rigging the results, but half of them voted not to expel Hyansu, and it wasn't out of sympathy. It was because they weren't sure when they themselves might turn into something like him. Do you remember that post Hyansu saw about the apocalypse? Turns out Eun-hyuk had seen it too. He showed a photo from his phone to Ikyung, and what she saw shook her to her core, because the person who made that post was her husband. On the way back to room 1408, Dark Hyansu appeared once again, sensing a monster nearby. Hyansu almost walked straight into danger. Luckily, Sangwook was there and knocked some sense into him with a punch, but the door was already open. A flaming monster with lightning-fast speed appeared, nearly killing Sangwook. Hyansu stepped forward slowly, only to see an old man and a young woman drive the monster away using a crossbow. Yuri and the old man also noticed something strange about Hyansu, but instead of rejecting him, they chose to go with him to room 1408. Meanwhile, the supermarket owner was sleeping until he sensed something was off. He woke to find his wife standing over him. She was holding a weapon behind her back. Years of silence, years of abuse had all built up. She didn't know if she'd turn into a monster, but she was sure of one thing: she had to kill him before that happened. Across the room, the pervert saw what was happening. From the woman's words, he realized Sangwook had gone upstairs. Hearing this, he searched his body and didn't find the key. That's when panic set in. The key unlocked a room full of evidence, proof of his crimes. When Sangwook entered that room, his suspicions were confirmed. The pervert was a child predator. Years ago, a man's daughter had been one of his victims. Desperate for justice, he begged Sangwook to investigate. Now, Sangwook stood in the room, eyes locked on the photos pinned to the wall. Meanwhile, Hyansu reunited with Dusik. Inside the same apartment, they saw the woman who had transformed into the grotesque monster. Back downstairs, Jisoo and Jae-hyun painted a giant SOS sign and hung it by the door, hoping the military would see it. The pervert was no longer calm, afraid that Sangwook would come after him. He cut his own hand, trying to prove he hadn't mutated. Then he left the isolation room, weapon in hand, but it was already too late. Sang-wook was waiting. The pervert tried to attack him, but Sang-wook endured the pain and walked right up to him. He thought of all the girls who had died, and with a hammer in hand he executed him. Then, he dragged the body to the shutter door, opened it, and pulled him outside. Sang-wook brought him to where the monsters hid, then turned back, and shut the gate behind him. He didn't intend to go back inside, but Jae-hyun appeared. He believed in Sang-wook. He knew he was a good man, and because of that Sang-wook lived. The bodies of the girl and the soldier in camouflage were also brought inside. With Do-sik's help, their defenses were rebuilt quickly. Hyansu once again stepped out into the unknown, this time to hunt monsters. Inside, the supermarket owner had another nosebleed, and just outside, a monster feeding on the pervert's corpse was suddenly snatched away by a massive hand. Sang-wook's earlier actions had stirred controversy. To thank him, the older woman took off the only valuable item she had on her. Sang-wook glanced at it and said nothing. He walked to a temporary grave mound nearby and burned the belongings of the man who had once begged him to find his daughter along with the money he had paid. In Sang-wook's eyes, a mission left unfinished was a mission unpaid. Jae-hyun approached him. He was the only one who truly understood Sang-wook's sense of duty. He took Sang-wook to the supermarket and handed it over to him, giving him, at least for now, a new purpose.
이제 그쪽이 여기 담당입니다.
내가 왜?
다른 방식으로 싸워보시라고요. 여기 혼자 있기 좋습니다.
To prepare for emergencies, the group started doing drills. They set up traps, and Jisoo acted as the mock zombie. But for Eun-yu, it was all nonsense. The drills were Eun-hyuk's idea, and unsurprisingly, his sister was against it. Their relationship had always been tense. After all, Eun-yu wasn't really his biological sister. Ever since Lee-kyung saw her husband's online post, she couldn't stop thinking about everything he'd done before the outbreak, so she made up her mind she would go to his workplace and get answers herself. Eun-hyuk seemed to sense her intention, so he kicked her out in his own way. Repaying a personal debt, Lee-kyung rode off on the old man's prized motorcycle. In the days that followed, under Eun-hyuk's leadership, residents began doing daily temperature checks and physical inspections. Hyansu went out scavenging for supplies. One day, the supermarket owner reappeared in front of everyone. This was no ordinary zombie outbreak. Since it was her husband, she insisted on dealing with it herself. She walked up to the man and struck him with a blunt weapon. Just one hit, and he snapped back to reality. Then he muttered 3 words, "Kill me, please." And so he died by his wife's hand. Hyansu watched from the side, terrified that one day, this might be his fate too. Meanwhile, Lee-kyung arrived at her husband's office. Inside the drawer, she found his tablet and the post. Her husband had written that he was infected. It had been 10 days since the nosebleeds and fainting spells began. During that time, a monster kept surfacing inside him, but if he could survive for 15 days, the symptoms would stabilize. These were known as special infectees, people who might be humanity's only hope. Right then, a group of soldiers arrived and took Lee-kyung away. She asked about her husband, but a woman told her he had become an experiment. No one knew if he was alive or dead. Now it was clear they were hunting special infectees. Lee-kyung looked her in the eye and said, "I know where to find one." She was talking about Hyansu. At that moment, Hyansu was heading toward the underground parking garage when he was ambushed. A mysterious creature had strung him up in the air, half suspended. By the time Eun-hyuk and the others arrived, Hyansu's body was covered in thick, green liquid. A strange creature stood nearby, almost as if it were asleep. Eun-hyuk warned everyone, "Don't wake him." They carefully reached Hyansu and got him down, but just as they were about to leave, Jisoo dropped something. The loud, metallic clang echoed through the parking garage. The speed-type mutant woke up. Meanwhile, Do-sik ran into trouble of his own. A spider-like monster suddenly appeared and charged straight at him. Its screams were like nails on a chalkboard, echoing off the walls. A curly-haired guy blocked the exit, arms wide, refusing to let anyone through. But Yuri and Eun-yu weren't having it. They pushed past him and rushed inside. By the time they arrived, the monster had Do-sik pinned to the ground. Seconds later, more women burst in. Together, They fought tooth and nail, managing to trap the spider mutant and lift it off the floor. Then, the little girl stepped forward, lit a Molotov cocktail, and hurled it at the monster. Meanwhile, back in the garage, an arrow slammed into the speed mutant's eye. Eun-hyuk triggered a car alarm to draw the creature's attention, but it was moving too fast, hitting it was nearly impossible. Then Sang-wook and 2 others showed up right in its path. Just as the mutant lunged, Eun-hyuk and Jae-hyun came crashing in, driving straight into the fray. Even then, the creature didn't back down, and the blaring car noise just brought more of them swarming. Eun-hyuk gripped the wheel, laser-focused, while the others fought off monsters clawing at the car. It was chaos. Eventually, the car screeched to a stop. Just then, the speed mutant reappeared. Up on the first floor, the group found Dusik, badly wounded. Then, Dark Hyansu appeared once again. No words, just a stun gun in hand and a death charge straight at the spider mutant. The thing stabbed him over and over. No one knew how many times. If Hyansu hadn't already mutated, he'd have been dead right there. But he survived. Bloody and barely standing, he made his way back to the isolation room. At the door, someone tried to stop him.
더 힘들게 해서.
이번엔 네가 선택해.
Hyansu didn't flinch, didn't speak. He just closed the door behind him like he'd finally made his choice. Later, during a quiet meal, Hyansu walked up holding his tray. The girl who had once apologized to him stood, gently asking, "Do you want some more?" While everyone else was still worried about having enough for themselves, she was the only one who offered to share. Like Sang-wook, Hyansu had always been the outsider. When everyone else looked at them with fear or disgust, only the old man never judged. Because all the special infectees the military had found had ended up dead, their entire plan was falling apart. But Lee-kyung had information. She knew the location of a surviving special infectee, so the female officer decided to let her go. Before sending her off, she handed Lee-kyung a GPS tracker. "Press the button," she said, "and we'll come find you." Meanwhile, Eun-hyuk and Dusik were in the underground garage, trying to repair one of the damaged vehicles. Eun-hyuk needed a working car for upcoming missions, but their conversation was overheard by the man with glasses. Later, that same man barged into Eun-hyuk's room and discovered something shocking. Their food was almost gone. Feeling betrayed, he stormed inside in a rage.
니들끼리 도망치라는 거 내 모를 줄 알았어? 내 목숨 내놔.
그만두시죠.
아무도 못 믿어.
진정하시고 일단 얘기를 좀 하시죠.
자기 누나. 자기 누나라고. 자기 누나 새끼야.
뭐하는 쥐들이야? 애들 보기 부끄럽지도 않아? 너 같은 놈이 제일 먼저 죽지. 정신 붙들어.
The old man calmed him down. With the secret out, Eun-hyuk decided to face it head-on. He gathered everyone together. He explained that they only had 5 days' worth of food left. Someone needed to go out and find supplies. But instead of sending Hyansu, Eun-hyuk went to Sang-wook. After Eun-hyuk left, the man with glasses approached Sang-wook and apologized for the way he'd acted.
맞을 짓 해서 미안합니다. 나도 때려서 미안합니다.
Jae-hyun had seen the change in Sang-wook. Ever since the two had become friends, Jae-hyun often came by to share a drink with him. At dawn, something happened to Jisoo. After checking her condition, Eun-hyuk realized it was appendicitis. Under normal circumstances, it would have been nothing, but in a place like this, it could be fatal. Eun-hyuk was a med student, but he'd never performed surgery in his life. All he had was theory. Still, there was no time to hesitate. After getting Jisoo's consent, he told everyone what medical supplies he needed. Hyansu was the first to step up. He jumped in a car, heading to a nearby hospital to find anesthetics. But as soon as the car left the garage, a massive hand flipped it over. The muscle-bound mutant was still alive. No time to think. Hyansu rushed into battle. Back inside, the sound of chaos told Eun-hyuk everything he needed to know. They had failed. The anesthetics weren't coming. Jisoo would have to endure the surgery without them. Hyansu was no match for the monster. His frame was too small, too fragile. Just when things looked hopeless, the old man arrived and threw a Molotov to buy them time. But as soon as he helped Hyansu up, blood poured from his nose and mouth. The old man knew he was about to turn too. So he made a decision. He would sacrifice himself. Just as the creature was about to kill him, Ik-young came barreling and driving a fire truck straight into the monster. The monster roared and grabbed the fire truck, trying to smash her to death. But a streetlight blocked the swing. The monster tried again and again, but it was no use. While it circled the truck to strike from another side, Ik-young slipped into the driver's seat. She reversed hard. At that very moment, the car Sang-wook had driven exploded. The blast hit the creature dead on. It flailed, trying to beat the fire out. But Ik-young didn't wait. Since it was her husband, she insisted As the muscle-bound monster was finally defeated, Jisoo's surgery was also completed. Ik-young handed the old man an inhaler for his asthma and then went straight to Eun-hyuk to ask about Hyansu. But Eun-hyuk didn't answer. Instead, he asked her about what was happening outside. The truth was harsh. The military had only let Ik-young return because they needed Hyansu's location. It was the only way she could see her husband again. To confirm Hyansu's mutation, Ik-young walked up and slashed him across the arm. The wound healed instantly. Hyansu was confused. Ik-young didn't hide anything. She explained everything to Hyansu about how the military was hunting special infectees. Meanwhile, changes were happening elsewhere. The supermarket owner's wife began showing symptoms. She had spent half her life suffering under a cruel husband, and now, just when he was gone, this happened. Kind-hearted to the end, she offered to leave voluntarily, but everyone knew her, and in a rare moment of unity, they all raised their hands voting for her to stay. Still, she chose to move into the isolation room. She walked up to Hyansu and said these words.
어떻게 버텼을까? 이제 알았는데 해줄 수 있는 게 없어. 못난 어른이라서 미안해.
Because satellites were now useless, the military had given Ik-young a GPS tracker. If she pressed the button, they would find her instantly. Ik-young was torn. If she pressed it, she could save everyone, maybe even save humanity. But Hyansu would be doomed. If she didn't, they might all die, and she would never see her husband again. Just as she hesitated, a stranger burst in. From the look of him, he was a deserter and he kept mumbling the same thing, "Run. You have to run." When the sun rose, Jisoo finally woke up. Seeing Jae-hyun by her side, she opened up her heart to him, just when everyone thought they could finally have a moment of peace. But the arrival of the soldier changed everything. His radio suddenly crackled to life. Ik-young, worried about giving away their position, smashed the device immediately. She also told Hyansu to take down the SOS signal from the rooftop. In a world like this, there was one thing even scarier than the monster's humans. After dealing with the immediate danger, Ik-young found the supermarket owner's wife. But just as she started to say, "If you can hold out for 15 days," the woman began bleeding heavily. At the same time, Hyansu, returning from the rooftop, ran into the security guard. The last thing the guard had eaten was the rotten fish given to him by a resident. Now, his face was crawling with flies. Hyansu saw him get into the elevator. A bad feeling hit him instantly. He raced to sound the alarm, but it was already too late. As he rushed downstairs, Sang-wook was ambushed by a mutant. Hyansu made a desperate leap, but he had overestimated his body's healing ability. No matter how fast he could heal, falling from the rooftop wasn't something he could recover from right away. The elevator doors opened. The security guard came face to face with the woman who had given him the rotten fish. Jae-hyun charged in, fighting to save her. In the struggle, the guard's lawnmower blade sliced off Jae-hyun's arm. Without hesitation, Jae-hyun threw himself at the guard, dragging him into the elevator. they both disappeared inside. Jae-hyun's death hit hardest for Jisoo. Before the battle, he had confessed his feelings to her, and it hit Sang-wook too. Jae-hyun had been one of the few who accepted him, even when he sneaked into the store for a drink every now and then. In a world like this, real friends were rare. Now, one of them was gone. Amid all the grief and confusion, they gave Jae-hyun a final farewell. A car sped toward their shelter and screeched to a halt. A group of armed men stormed out. Without hesitation, their leader shot the deserter dead on the spot and ordered his men to round up every survivor they could find. One by one, the survivors were dragged into the open. One of the thugs drew a circle on the ground and sneered, "Step out of line, and you die." When a girl stumbled and couldn't move fast enough, the gang leader shot her without a second thought. The brutal search continued. One thug with a nose ring found Jisoo. He was twisted, poking at her wounded arm, ignoring her pain. Before things got worse, a man named Ui Myung stepped in, forcing the thug to back off for now. Learning that Eun Hyuk was the shelter's leader, the gang leader offered him a choice. Unlike useless cowards, he wanted survivors who could think. After a moment's hesitation, Eun Hyuk stood and walked over to the man. They approached the supermarket owner's wife together, but the leader didn't care. He thought Eun Hyuk was too soft, and with that, he killed the supermarket owner's wife. The poor woman had been fighting so hard, with just a few days left to reach the 15-day mark, but in the end, she was killed. Not by a monster, but by another human. The gunshot tore through the silence. Ik-hyung and Sang-wook could no longer hide. They led a desperate charge. The others followed, but fists were no match for guns. They lost. In the chaos, Hyansu's secret was exposed. He was a special infectee. But then the supermarket owner's wife, who should have been dead, appeared again. Her eyes were empty, hollow. She attacked Hyansu without warning. Hyansu realized she wasn't human anymore. With no other choice, he was forced to kill her himself. After that, the thug seized Hyansu and dragged him up to the rooftop. Meanwhile, the thug with the nose ring smelled disinfectant on Yuri and tried to drag her away for something far worse. But Yuri struck first. Jisoo helped. Together, they killed him. On the rooftop, the gang leader joked about how they should kill Hyansu, but Hyansu ignored him. He walked calmly to the rooftop door. Thinking he was trying to escape, the gang leader fired a shot, but Hyansu wasn't running away. He slammed the rooftop door shut and locked it, saying, "No one leaves." Before they could react, Ui Myung revealed his true nature. He was a special infectee, just like Hyansu.
너 해줘?
아니요. 괜찮습니다.
The surviving thugs tried to escape downstairs, only to find the lower floors back under Eun Hyuk's control. Hyansu led Ui Myung to the room where the mutated woman lay, still nurturing her monstrous child. Posters fluttered across the rooftop, offering rewards for betraying special infectees. Ui Myung whispered to Hyansu, "If they see these posters, they'll sell you out without a second thought." Under his manipulation, Hyansu chose to abandon his teammates. When he returned, the others thought he had defeated the invaders. Instead, Hyansu pointed at Ui Myung and said, "He's an infectee too." Only then did everyone finally back off and stop targeting him. In the quiet, Ui Myung told Hyansu everything. He had once been captured by the military, used as an experiment. They had tried to separate the monster from the man but failed every time.
그때 난 깨달았지. 아! 이건 지나구나. 나를 선택받았구나. 인간들은 실패했어. 실험뿐만이 아니라 자연에서도 도태되어 버린 거야. 받아들여. 어차피 인간과 우린 공존할 수가 없어.
Ui Myung wasn't wrong. Even a monster that had once saved a little boy had been hunted down and destroyed. For the first time, Hyansu started to believe him. When Eun Hyuk tried to talk to him, Hyansu showed refusal for the first time. Eun Hyuk called out to Ui Myung. Ui Myung wouldn't stay here for long. After all, the military would soon come to sweep through this place. Based on what he knew about the military, they would rather kill 1,000 by mistake than let even one potential mutant go. The seriousness of the situation was beyond Ik-hyung and Eun Hyuk's expectations. Ik-hyung finally stopped hiding and revealed the truth about the tracking device. But what they didn't know was that the curly-haired man had overheard their conversation and pressed the tracking device.
여기서 죽을 순 없다고.
Meanwhile, Dusik suddenly had a nosebleed during the earlier fight against the gang. In order not to hurt others, Dusik chose to return to room 1408. Facing the mutated woman inside the room, Dusik himself also began to change. The next day, Yuri had an asthma attack. Sangwook, despite the danger, wanted to take her outside to find medicine. However, he was stopped by Uimayon. Uimayon was afraid Sangwook would report them to the military, but Hyansu knew that Sangwook would never do such a thing. For Hyansu's sake, Uimayon let them go. However, Sangwook had barely run a few steps before Uimayon changed his mind and shot both him and Yuri dead. Right after that, he pointed his gun at the others and carried out a brutal massacre. Uimayon was already disappointed by Hyansu's mercy. At that moment, he no longer intended to cooperate with Hyansu. Coming to Hyansu, Uimayon revealed the truth. It turned out that the supermarket owner's wife was already dead before, and it was Uimayon who had killed her.
그거 사실 나였거든.
At that time, the supermarket owner's wife was completely dead, and it was Uimayon who controlled her body and made her walk up to Hyansu. Upon learning the truth, Hyansu chose to stop resisting the monster inside him. In an instant, the fully awakened Hyansu emerged, and a scorching heat filled the entire room. Uimayon had no strength to resist at all. To awaken the rampaging Hyansu, Dusik chose to sacrifice himself. Hyansu woke up again. He looked at Dusik's body but couldn't remember who he was. However, tears kept streaming down his face uncontrollably. Hyansu had lost his memory. From a distance, Eunyu secretly watched him. She had finally started to develop feelings for Hyansu, and even used a trick to get him to agree to one of her conditions. Eunyu didn't know how to describe her feelings. The sun rose once again. The old man was gone. Compared to others, his passing was painless. Before he left, the old man found a secret passage. This passage could offer everyone a chance at survival. Just as everyone was filled with hope, the monster that was supposed to have been eliminated by Hyansu turned out to be still alive and even drove off in the thug's old car. On a snowy night, the military arrived. Hyansu knew they had come for him. He walked out on his own, while the others hid inside the secret passage. Eunyu noticed Hyansu hadn't come, and wanted to go find him, but Eunhyuk stopped her. Eunhyuk promised her that he would bring Hyansu back. Eunhyuk lied to his sister. When he met Hyansu, he didn't try to persuade him to stay. Eunyu soon realized that her brother had deceived her. Eunhyuk had once said his desire was to protect everyone. He put on his headphones, played his favorite song, and looked at a photo of himself with his sister. Nosebleed dripping, he sat quietly as the building collapsed and buried him. Meanwhile, Hyansu walked alone in the snow, his body riddled with bullets fired by the military. As he stumbled forward, memories from the past flashed before his eyes. After a long time, when Ikyung and the others finally climbed out, the military was already waiting. The survivors were rescued. They boarded a truck heading toward a shelter. As for Hyansu, he was also taken away, but the one who took him was Sangwook. Season 1 ends.